Welcome back in. While we wait on the Supreme Court to weigh in on whether states like Virginia can require porn sites to verify the age of their users, a group has already sued several of those sites on behalf of a 14-year-old, accusing them of violating Kansas's age verification law. And joining us now is Dani Pinter, the director of the Law Center with the National Center on Sexual Exploitation. Dani, thank you for joining us. Can you explain a little bit the background of this new lawsuit?
Absolutely. So our client was just 14 years old, a teen boy. Classic story. He got exposed to some content that was really harmful to him. What's important is his mother actually did everything she could to keep him safe. She had filters on all her devices, locked down the computers. He wasn't allowed to have his device in his room at night. But unfortunately, he found an old laptop in a closet. And so the mom had forgotten about it. He was able to connect to Wi-Fi. And then unfortunately, he was exposed to really bad content. He was able to access hardcore pornographic websites in Kansas without any age verification. And that's against Kansas law now.
Now, the question before the court is really about the test that we apply to this law. So we may not ultimately get an answer on whether these laws are okay, but let's talk a little bit about the arguments for why these laws are needed and why they may even pass a really strict test if the courts are required to impose that when they're looking at it.
Yeah, so even at the strictest test, if there is a compelling government interest and it's the least restrictive means, then this measure should be okay. And I think age verification is, and that's why we believe in the Kansas law and these other state laws, and we're bringing this case. So we know now that, the average age of exposure to really hardcore, dangerous content for kids is sometimes below 10 years old. All of our kids are just exposed. Almost every child has a device now, has access to a device. There's devices in schools. It's really inescapable. And we also know without a doubt that exposure to this content at a young age is very harmful. So of course, there's a compelling government interest. We have to protect our kids from this content. And so that's why we think this age verification measure is the perfect thing, at least to begin, right? It's the starting point, and we think it's very reasonable, right? The least that these websites could do is make sure that kids are not accessing their sites.
So let's flip to the other side's argument here, because of course we know there's a long history of porn-related cases in the Supreme Court. I sat through oral argument of this one. It can be somewhat uncomfortable to hear the justices discuss it, but it's a part of our lives. And it is a long part of First Amendment cases in jurisprudence. And in this country, you not only have the right to speak, you have the right to be free from compelled speech, and you have the right to access speech. And that's part of the First Amendment argument here, that anyone has a right here in creating this age verification dissuades or prevent adults from being able to access perfectly constitutional material.
Yeah, so that's exactly the test, right? Does this age verification measure prevent adults from access to content they have a right to access? We believe it doesn't, and that's why the age verification measure will work. The last time the Supreme Court has reviewed a similar measure to protect kids online was in 1996, 1998. So we know so much more, and the courts know so much more, and the technology has come such a long way since then, that the ability to prevent minors while also freely allowing adults access to these sites is completely doable, where it was dubious in the 90s. And then that was really the sticking point for the court back then, was if we require these websites or restrict these websites to keep kids off, will that really vastly deter adults? And that question, that sticky question and that uncertainty is just gone now. There are myriad ways where technology can keep kids off, even without confirming identity. So there's ways to navigate privacy and any kind of deterrence that would prevent adults from accessing and protect kids while giving adults the free speech access rights that they have.
And also, can you address the concern that these sites would then be collecting this type of data that then could be used or exposed? I mean, we see data privacy issues all of the time rampant. 20 years ago, 40 years ago, that wasn't an issue, but it is today. And how does this address those concerns?
Well, it's pretty easy to require that data be deleted, right? It's also pretty easy to make sure that there's an intermediary third party that's actually doing the age verification and that they delete that data and they don't use it. So I do think that's very important, but where we weren't sure how to deal with that, we know how to now, right? And these tech companies know how, and there's a lot of tools. We just need to be, as lawmakers and as citizens, very conscientious that we make sure these websites are not preserving that data when they shouldn't, and that it's handled with care.
All right, Dani Pinter, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.